science, baby.
What's happening, fam? L.A.R. movement still moving. Subscribe or die trying. Good morning, afternoon. As you see, it's me, the most handsome guy in the black manosphere. And my man, the coach and clinician. We're about to talk something about these. Y'all call them 304s. Y'all call them women. And y'all say they're winning. And this is a hot topic. And I saw what happened last night with Sister George's humongous troll. And Ramil's kind of humongous troll too. So if you ain't winning, you're losing, as the thumbnail would say. So AMS hand rub. And let's get to this content.
Let's get to it.
So if they're winning, well, they winning.
Well, listen, they're definitely winning up front. On the front end, they're winning because we have a society, LA, of men that have been conditioned to be simps. I talk about it from the clinical perspective. You have what's called the conscious and the unconscious simp. The conscious simp is a simp that more or less he sacrifices important male principles. He knows what he's doing, but he does it anyway because he's been conditioned to defer power. But then, LA, you got what's called the unconscious simp, and that's called supplementing irrational male patterns. And I say he's a male because he has a pattern of doing things based on being a male instead of based on being a man. And so the unconscious simp has been conditioned to serve the modern woman, which is a byproduct of having narcissistic traits. And so on the front end, the 304s are winning because men, many times, they defer their power in the relationship and they give women that are not worthy of that honor or worthy of having their last name to be wife, they give it to them without holding her accountable. So on the front end, 304s are winning on the front end, but we'll talk about the back end in a minute.
You know what? I feel like a slight debate. I went to college, and one of the greatest debate teachers ever was Dr. Freeman at Texas Southern.
Texas Southern, right.
Yeah, so I took his course before. He was one of my teachers.
Right.
So I might decide to just flip-flop and get this antagonistic thing going because you said the subconscious simp. So could the 304s be winning because they're subconscious simps?
Unconscious simp.
And the conscious.
Unconscious.
Unconscious simp.
And conscious, right. So the conscious simp he's a man, but he's more or less a slave of negative social conditioning and negative socialization. Every man has what's called an intrinsic hard drive that lets them know, LA, what's right and wrong. So the conscious simp, he said, I know I shouldn't be doing this for, but he does it anyway. But he knows how to break that psychic mold. But the unconscious simp is a man that's been conditioned all the way around on all areas. He compromises because he's not a man, he's a male. Because manhood is a series of hills and valleys, victories and failures. We are born males, but we become men through trials and tests. But he has not been adequate. He has not adequately learned how to become a man because his development has been arrested for a myriad of reasons. Growing up in single parent homes, being indoctrinated to think that the woman is greater than him. And then a lot of times where he's been effeminated or more or less emasculated because he's in more or less homes, LA, that he's never seen true masculine authority. And so he does things based on the social conditioning of his mom. So he's an unconscious simp because what he does, he supplements irrational he's not a man, male patterns. He has a pattern of more or less giving his power to women that are not worthy of that power.
Interesting. Because one could say that if you want to blame the content creators in the black manosphere, but more so if you want to blame, you can point to the viewers of the content and call them unconscious simps.
Okay.
Because this is what people were complaining about.
Right.
You consciously don't support the brothers, but The women you might call 304s, somehow you just unconsciously support them. You just happen to go onto their pages, and you can hit the like button with no problem.
Right.
You
That's an
can
excellent
share
point.
their content with no problem. You can
Right.
put that in the group chat with no problem.
Mhm.
And you can also donate with no problem. So, does that mean the unconscious simpery in this space is part of the problem?
Well, that's you did an excellent expose, but actually a excellent turnaround. And I didn't even think of the way you presented it. So you're correct. Not only is the unconscious simp a subjugate to women, but the unconscious simp does not support male content. They can liberate him from his simphood. And so the unconscious simp actually, you know, he's a parrot to a lot of the dysfunction that happens in our communities. But a lot of time, instead of being an ally with masculine men, he's an agitator or a sympathizer, no pun intended, to negative female behavior. He's a sympathizer, you know, that's a pun, no pun intended, pun unintended, to bad female behavior, because every time masculine men speak out, instead of him allying himself or aligning himself, L.A., with masculine men, he fights them because he's not used to seeing masculine authority. That's why he can't support content that's more or less of the masculine ilk or the empowerment ilk, because he has been negatively impacted by negative social conditioning.
Now, back in the day, me and George making like the clown about who's the lead singer of the Temptations. And I say, it's me. Say, they ain't paying to see Otis, you know? So, so when it comes to the sympatry, you know, he said, we supplying drugs. It's not my fault you a fiend. Not my fault you a fiend. Uh, so when it comes to what you're just talking about, right?
Right.
Could the unconscious simp, because let me go back to what the brother said right here, right here, right here. So a content creator supplying drugs. See, here's the issue. If 304 is winning, are we the Derek Jackson of simps? We know how
We're
to
not.
we I just had to ask the question because he said we fiend, we supplying fiends here. See, brothers say they want content that helps them improve, but what exactly do they want to improve on?
Mhm.
Predominantly their sex life.
Mhm.
So to improve on your sex life, you're gonna have to trick some. You're gonna have to simp some. And the issue is you're trying to do it without tricking and simping that much. But the problem is here. Why are 304s winning? If they winning, if they winning on the front end, it's probably because of laziness.
Right.
Because if you simp, that plays into the laziness of telling people what they want to hear to get what you want.
Right. Right.
So
Right.
interestingly enough, you got men who always like taking the easy way out.
That's a good point.
So just like you say, the 304s are winning on the front end, but they lose on the back end.
Right.
Maybe the fiends aren't winning on the front end or the back end, because it seems like when they're young, they have this issue, and when they're old, they have this issue.
Right.
So when are they winning is the question.
So the question is, when are the 304s winning?
No. When are the fans of the Temptations who don't want to admit that? When are the unconscious simps winning?
I would say that the unconscious simp wins when he adequately learns to address his unconscious pathologies that are leading to him deferring his power as a man. He wins, like Black Ram say, in therapy, we don't lie. So you have to be honest with yourself and tell the truth. But like Harriet Tubman said, she said, I could have freed a lot more if they didn't already know L.A., that they were already slaves. So you got to be willing to free yourself from that unconscious pathology or tomfoolery and he'll begin to win once he realizes that he really is the prize catcher. I came up with a term, L.A., called the prize catcher, because so many men have been conditioned to think that she's the prize and that, she's better than him. She's on the pedestal, but no. The man is the prize catcher, meaning he determines if she's the prize, and if she's prize worthy, then he will catch her and make her his woman based on community norms, masculine norms, and his own personal norms and standards that he's more or less equivocated in his mind to help him become the best man for the job.
Interesting. I told you I was going to get my debate on a little bit. And I also said I was going to have a good time with this. So since these guys were taught to be simps and they were socialized to be simps, and they're simping, lines the pockets of 304s, they subconsciously or unconsciously haven't seen themselves as a prize yet. So is that a psychological break that they have?
Once they see themselves as the prize, yes, it is a psychological break. In the clinical world, L.A., we call it a schema. A schema is part of cognitive science, which is based on awareness. So a schema is a pattern of thinking, L.A., that can be good or bad. Most men have a very negative schema about themselves, but that schema has to be remodified, L.A., in order for them to see themselves in a more positive and more virtuous light. Some will argue, L.A., the American black men have the lowest standards when it comes down to women. They say we take women out of the trash can and try to reform them. And we do that because we don't think we're worthy. We don't think we're good. We don't think we're worthy of higher quality women. I just came back from Brazil doing some research and doing some anthropological work and trying to do some work. I did some work with Aaron Ferris, and we were talking about the importance of travel and mental health. But American black men don't understand that abroad, once they get their mind right, women of other countries love black men, American black men, because American black men are more egalitarian than other ethnic groups of men. So I would say that they begin to win once they begin to see the king in them. Most black men have not begun to see the king manifest in them, and they have not seen that king manifest in them, L.A., because they've never seen power being manifested in their father. If you go back and look at the Lion King, I think it was Mufasa or Simba, he said, remember who you are when he was dead. The point is, you can't remember who you are if you don't know who you are as a man. Many times that comes from a strong masculine man that knows who he is, and he's wholly whole. But many guys have never seen that, so they continue to defer power in that, what I call that negative simp cycle. And so until they break that simp cycle, then they're not going to become the best versions of themselves as a man. That's why I said there are 7 steps, and that's why I rock the 7 steps that a man must go through in order to become optimized. Understanding male mental health and also how it impacts the mind through what we call a somatic process is paramount to the function of a man, but also, L.A., understanding female psychology and how female nature works on the mental health and the physical health of a man as well. Once we can adequately see all those variables in place, then that man begins to become an evolutionary man. He begins to see himself as the king that he really is. But until then, he's in that negative karmic, what I call karmic loop, constantly trying to refine himself, but never getting anywhere.
They say a double-minded man is what?
Unstable in all his ways.
So what if I was supposed to thought that, first of all, with the king reference, people want to be kings, but people don't want the responsibility of a kingdom. So does that make them a king, or does that make them a prince on the throne?
That's an excellent point. Say it one more time so I can reframe it in my mind. Say it one more time.
Many people want to be the king, but they don't want the responsibility. So does that make him a king, or does that make him a prince sitting on the throne?
It makes him a prince sitting on the throne. Adam was a king because Adam had all the dominion. He knew what it was to be the king of it, not only himself, but the king of the animals when he had dominion before his woman came. So many are a prince sitting on the throne because you can't, I'm not going to even call him a prince. I will call him a pauper. Okay. Because they have a poverty mindset. And part of being a man, or more or less going into true masculinity, LA, is taking on not only the responsibility of being a man, but going through the rigor. Remember, I said in the Manhood Chronicles that manhood is a series of hills and valleys, victories and failures. Manhood is not a destination, it's a journey. You're not destined to become a man, it's a journey into manhood. Once you learn how to assess that journey, then you become to evolve as you begin to evolve as a man. Nobody gave you and I, LA and the brothers that are listening, the blueprint to masculinity. We became better through trials. We became better because there was a community of men that sharpened other men. Iron sharpens iron. But we don't have that anymore. That's why what you're doing and what I'm doing is very important. And as a licensed therapist, I take clinical science and blend it with the art of humanity. And then I give the kaleidoscope or perspective to help men understand what their worth is. You're not going to find any therapists, licensed therapists in this space doing what I'm doing because it's not PC. But because I love the brotherhood, that's what I do.
I'm going somewhere with what you just said. The one thing about you can't turn a 304 into a housewife. Most people, the biggest issue with a 304 is when she doesn't know she's a 304 or she doesn't accept it.
Right.
But the ones that accept it, that's a whole different ball game. But here's the interesting part. I was saying the man who's double-minded is unstable in all his ways. What if I propose that, I don't know, just saying that maybe these 304s are winning because some of you brothers are triple-minded. And the reason why I say triple-minded, because I'm about to use a psychological term. You got one black man. He has his id persona, his ego persona, and his super ego persona. Same person, but he acts three different ways. He has no control over his id or his super ego, and he's still figuring out his ego. So for all you people who don't get the reference, I've said it before, it's the cartoon reference. When you got the character sitting in the middle and the devil on one shoulder and the angel on another.
Right.
Id would be the devil, angel would be the super ego. So, and the person's in the middle. What if I were to say that maybe 304s are winning because more 304s know who they are and more guys are trying to figure out who they are because they're operating three different ways?
That's an excellent point. Right. That goes back to what we said earlier about the unconscious simp. He's supplementing irrational male patterns. It's a pattern of dysfunction that goes on in his head because he's not aware of it. So, yes, your points are well taken. In clinical science, LA, we talk about ego defense mechanisms. The id is more primitive. But the ego, there's healthy ego defense mechanisms, and then there are unhealthy ego defense mechanisms. A lot of times, I would say most modern men are subjects, LA, of the unhealthy ego defense mechanism, like overgeneralization. They tend to do a lot of displaced aggression. They get mad at men like you and I that try to tell the truth. Many of them go through issues called projection. Many of them deal with ego defense mechanism, unhealthy, called reaction formation, which basically means that I say one thing, but I mean something else. So in your face, they'll say, LA, I support and respect the brotherhood, but on the unconscious level, or what they're really trying to say, to hell with black men talking about male empowerment. Because they have been conditioned to become subjugates of the modern woman instead of demanding power. In behavioral modification, you have to demand power in order to get power because the masculine is about power. Men do things based on hierarchy, LA. When I worked in prison, it was about a hierarchy. Men do things based on power. It's called the power differential. Top here, lower bottom here. So you're correct. It's that what I call gesticulation mentally of men going to what's called that negative karmic cycle that I talked about a couple of minutes ago. They're constantly trying to refine themselves, but they never reach their full potential because they don't know where to start. And that's why these conversations are so important, in my opinion.
See, I had the clown earlier today. I made some videos. People will see them later. But one of them is entitled, I promise I'll be on my purpose after I. And it's a picture of Lexington Steele. Lexington Steele is a porn star.
Porn star, right.
So maybe just the power we're not looking for power outside of the bedroom first. We're looking for power inside of the bedroom first. So how long does that journey take? And can you blame people? Can you blame people for working on their sexual most times wants, not even needs,
Right.
for pursuing their sexual needs before they pursue their own legacy?
Well, you know, every man got to have his own set of standards. You know, all men can be slaves to their penis. I don't care whether he's a noble man, whether he's a man of God, whether he's an intellectual. I think every man can be a slave of his penis. Look at Dr. King. Look at David of the Bible. David was a very noble man. He was a wise man. The only difference is, L.A., I think those men of the past had greater staying power and had a greater sense of self-worth and purpose because they had a greater community. And we were more in a patriarchal society. I think now men begin to become greater slaves because they don't have other men to hold them accountable and to corral them and to push them in the right direction by holding them accountable. Say, nah, bro, you can't do that. You got to be on your square. And so I would say that the current modern man is more at risk than men of the past because we live in a very gynocentric society where men don't know what their worth is and they don't have the community, L.A., to help them develop as men. They don't have a community. But that's why what you and I are doing in these shows, the Manhood Chronicles and the Kosher Clinician, are so important because I've had men come to me, L.A., in private and say, man, your channel is helping me grow. What you're doing is helping men grow. And so I would say that they're losing and them being a slave to their nature is an understanding, but it doesn't have to be that way if you have what's called the universality, the brotherhood, when men are working together and we're holding each other accountable. Because iron sharpens iron.
This might be why 304s are winning, what you just said. Because you brought up David and you brought up MLK Jr. Now, the MLK Jr. thing, for historical purpose, that could be speculation because a lot of that came from movies. So I'm gonna leave that alone, but I'm gonna use it anyway. It's hearsay in the court. But the thing about King David and MLK that's the opposite of the modern day man who's saying that the 304s are winning is they were kings first.
That's true.
The
That's
scandal came second.
Right.
These guys are not kings first.
Right.
So it's like they have no responsibility. They have no kingdom. But, you know, a 304 can win with a king because a king has resources to even provide for a 304.
Right.
A guy who is not a king, i.e. going back to the prince and the throne, he has no responsibilities. Mm-hmm. This plays into one thing that I got to say. Maybe 304s are winning and these type of guys are losing, or these type of guys are winning and 304s are losing. Depends on timing. Mm-hmm. But I know who's winning for certain. Mm-hmm. Hedonism.
Oh, definitely hedonism, no doubt. Right. It's winning. It's winning on the front end. It's winning,
and the back end.
Well,
I can easily say hedonism is killing people's legacy because what's winning is you got people on the front end, and then if they get themselves behind the 8 ball, what do they use to get out of the hole? Hedonism.
Well, it's all in perspective. You know, you're very intellectual. It's all in perspective. It depends on if you believe in what most scholars call the children of the book. You know, not here to push religion, but the gospel said that the wages of sin is death. So on the front end, it does look like you're winning. You know, you're getting women, you're getting hoes, you're having fun. But what is it doing to you mentally? What is it doing to your bank account? What is it doing to your purpose? What is it doing to your manifest destiny? Because every man has what's called a manifest destiny that needs to be uncovered or unrevealed. And so the manifest destiny of that man, more or less manifesting his worth in the earth, is being diminished because he's using his time, L.A., to focus on unsavory women instead of using his time to do discipline, because the gospel say that he that lacks discipline, L.A., will bring himself to poverty and shame. So it depends on how you look at it. If you look at it on the micro, meso, and the macro level. So on the front end, yes, it appears that he won. Depending on how you look at it, on the back end, it might be. But I would say overall, through a holistic manner, front end, he's winning. On the back end, he's not winning. Because time is money, and time supersedes money. And, you and I are getting close to the grave. Half of our life is over with. And so if you spend your formative years or your younger years chasing 304s, that was time that you could have been using to build your kingdom as a man and to more or less inspire and push your community forward. Even though the black community is dead, I would say most American communities are dead. But the black community is definitely dead. So up front, they might be winning. I would say on the back end, they're not winning, depending on how you look at it, because everybody's perspective is different.
I don't think they're winning at all. Because I think people, my argument would be if 304s are winning, and like the thumbnail said, who's losing? Mm-hmm. Because can you tell me what can you show me some 304 championships, mm-hmm. some 304 trophies?
Right.
Because anybody tell me what exactly have they won? Mm-hmm. Anybody.
Well, listen, they get temporary trinkets, but the truth is, even the 304s want a masculine man. That's why I said it appears that they are winning on the front end, but on the back end, the men that they're getting, L.A., they don't even respect them. They don't respect the simp. They don't respect the men that defer power. They'll use them, but her vagina tingles for a masculine man. Raekwon the Man was masculine in theory because Raekwon the Man didn't give a damn. He didn't validate her. He made her earn that validation. Now, don't get it twisted. There are some thugs that are simps too. But in general, those very hyper men, they don't care anything about that woman. They don't pay her any attention. So it makes her chase his validation. So they'll get with a man that's a beta male provider, but they really don't respect him. They'll tolerate him, but in the back of her mind, she wants a masculine man to check her. Even the most ardent feminist, L.A., wants a man to hold her accountable. A lot of feminists, you get them in the bedroom, they'll turn to a pussycat. But on the forefront, they act like lions. And so I would say that the 304 is definitely not winning. It's the illusion of winning. To the world, it's the illusion of winning. But the evidence calls her to be in a state of delusion because there's no evidence that she's really winning long term. That's why I say front end, it appears that she's winning, but long term, she's not winning because a lot of times the 304s end up divorcing the man that they married. So how are you winning? You might be cycling men through, but you're still angry and miserable because you're trying to relive that experience of that first time you got that dopamine rush when Raekwon blew your back out. And they can't replicate it. And now they've been burnt out by having sex with so many men. They can never get that first hit. That first hit is a hit that every drug addict tried to get, that dopamine rush, and a lot of times they can't replicate it because it's oxytocin abuse.
Interesting. I like the reference that you just made. And in the words of a great philosopher named Raekwon, cash rules everything around me. Mm-hmm. Cream, get the money, dollar bill, y'all. Even the 304s, they don't want masculine men. Mm-hmm. They want money.
They want money, right.
304s want R&R, mm-hmm. rest and relaxation. Mm-hmm. Can men, even rich men, afford to constantly pay for somebody's rest and relaxation without being agitated, aggravated, or getting rid of them? Mm-hmm. Absolutely not. Mm-hmm. No, there is not one guy in human history that says, you know what, I'm going to pay for this 304 for life. For life. Mm-hmm. What they're going to do is they're going to replace them at a certain point. The budget may stay the same, but the people may be different. Mm-hmm. Now, JC said something interesting. He said the system is the trophy, welfare, tax credits, that ECT, or I'm guessing, food stamps or whatever, EBT cards, that's what we think about. Mm-hmm. That has nothing to do with 304s. That has something to do with custody. So if you're saying 304s are winning custody and they're taking benefit from that, they're absolutely winning that.
Mm-hmm.
But what they're losing is what? A lifestyle of rest and relaxation.
Right.
Because people who gotta be on welfare and get tax credits and use EBT, there's no rest and relaxation in that lifestyle.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, but the interesting thing about this is, maybe just maybe, my flip floppy self today, maybe they are winning. What have they won? I could surmise that they won unconscious simps.
Right. The one unconscious simps, which is a house of fools.
I think
It's a house of fools.
I think this the price is right when it comes to unconscious simps. 304, come on down. There's got that they got a prize all to themselves. All to themselves. And the reason why it's so interesting when I say that is for me, you cannot blame a 304 for your simping. Because to simp, you got to know where she is going into the door. A lot of people, they say they're winning, but you, just like we say, you knew what he was coming into the door. You knew what she was coming into the door.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder, and this is gonna be this might suck some for the fellas, you know. Maybe she's winning because maybe just maybe your win was sex, but your sex wasn't good enough to keep her for free.
That's a good way to look at it.
So you thought your sex was a trophy,
Mm-hmm.
and it wasn't a good enough trophy.
Well, listen, she's been imprinted by multiple men. Your sex definitely ain't gonna beat the trophy. I mean, the more she has, it gives her more insatiable appetite. And you might be good in one area, but he might be better in the next area. So now you're playing the odds. Versus if she was a woman that had low bodies or was a virgin, then you're the only man that she knows. How can she compare something if you're all that she knows? And so if he thought using sex was a way to get her to submit, that's delusional, and it's delusional on his end because women that have had a lot of fun, they're used to penises, man. Trust.
Yeah, but and this is where it gets ugly, fellas. Women who are used to a lot of penises, a lot of sex,
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't mean they had orgasms.
That's true. That's true. That's true.
So you fellas can't make them orgasm because she's a 304. You don't really want to keep a 304. You want to get yours. But here's the problem. Big problem. Maybe she's winning because you didn't she didn't get as much out of it in the bedroom than you did. And now you got to pay to get her back because you were hustling backwards in the first place. Because now she made you pay to get it.
Mm-hmm.
And let me just explain this to you guys who might not understand or don't want to hear this part of it, right? 304s are winning and you might be losing because you're not the guy she calls after she goes out with the simp.
Mm-hmm.
You're the guy she calls before she goes out. You might be the backup date to the date. You're not the man who gets her in the bed after the date's over. So maybe she won free food that night. Maybe
Right.
she won a free experience that night. That's
Right.
maybe what she won.
Mm-hmm.
And your thought was he could take out and do whatever he want, but I'm gonna get her tonight. Only problem is you don't have her.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes what I'm getting at is, you know, some of this simping is sexual, and it's compensating because I didn't get you to stay sexually, so I got to pay you.
Right.
And now you see guys who have a big problem because I ain't got enough money to compete. And why don't you have enough money to compete? Because you're competing with people. Going back to what I brought up earlier, you're competing with David, who was a king first.
Right. 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 Her first imprint, her first true imprint.
So she likes the palace. The palace can make her stay without an orgasm. But can you make her stay without an orgasm? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So maybe she did win. She won a free ticket to the palace. But the question that I'm gonna have for that part is, and this is what I meant by having an issue with three different mindsets.
Right.
Is your super ego trying to take her out the palace while your id is trying to have sex with her, and your ego is trying to make her a good woman?
That's an excellent way to put it.
So maybe she's winning because with every one man like that she meets, she's dating three different men.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Every one man is three guys. And you can't admit you're the simp because that's just one mindset. You don't see yourself as a whole simp because you're a third simp.
Right. Right. Well, the options are definitely messing a lot of women up, man. It's caused them to have what I call a schizoid effect or splitting. They they've seen so much and done so much that they're confused. They're confused. They don't even know they're confused, and many times they don't. And so it's caused them to continue to go through their own karmic cycle because they're trying to refine themselves to get the man in their head that they think they deserve, but that man doesn't exist, and so they waste time more or less being saboteurs of their own ignorance. And so, in a way, they're similar to their unconscious simp because they're unconscious of their own pathologies. And it continues to go on and on and on and on again because when men try to tell them L.A. what we want and what they're looking for, they become deaf. Kevin Samuel talked about sign language, shame, insults, guilt, the need to be right. As a clinical therapist, I created a term called deaf. Deaf is based on cognitive dissonance. They deny the evidence. They become enraged when you present them with the evidence. They argue to ad hominem attacks, and they fight or flee. They become deaf. And so because they are deaf, they are saboteurs of their own demise. I had a lady on my show in the past by the name of Paco. She would go by the name Paco. She thought L.A. that she could be a hoe, a 304, do what she wanted to do, and that she could always pick from the man tree. But she came to an epiphany that over time her beauty faded. And those men that she thought she could get in her 20s and 30s, they no longer existed. So they're constantly reaching and grabbing to the point they reach nothing, which is a dark pit. So the unconscious simp is similar to the model woman of the 304. She thinks she's winning, but in actuality, she's not really winning. Because being a 304 for a long period of time gets you nothing but heartache, pain, and a used body. And that's an unpleasant truth that a lot of our women don't want to talk about. The sexual liberation movement has not, in my mind, empowered a lot of our women. It has depowered a lot of our women, in my opinion.
Interesting. So, if that's the case, then I have to ask another question about this. Because we like to move the goalposts and, semantic things to death, just like ladies do. From time to time, we do that. What's more important if you're a man? A woman wasting her womb being a 304, or you wasting your time chasing a 304?
I would say both. I would probably say both. Because time, yeah, I would say both. Because there was a time when a woman's value and her virtue was her body and her ability to be chaste. That was her selling point. But a man understands that time waits for no man. So the more he procrastinates chasing his lust for hedonism, the more he wastes his time. And listen, we all have been slaves of hedonism at some points of our lives. Some have been more and some have been less. But you normally get more wiser as you get older. And so I would say both, because once her virtue is gone, she can't get it back. Once she's been negatively imprinted by multiple men, then it's hard for her to have what's called cognitive awareness or mental clarity, because she's been imprinted by so many different people. So instead of her being that whole woman, every time she gives her body to different men, she's giving a part of herself away. So you get a whole woman, the more fun she have, that wholeness of that woman begins to split. So by the time you get her, you're only getting a fragment or a ghost of the woman that she was in the past, which in essence is not a wife-ready or a wife-worthy woman, in my opinion, because a lot of times those women are not satisfied. Or is there a small percentage that could probably change? Perhaps. But in general, in the rule itself, many of them have been damaged or impacted in a negative way because their virtue is gone. So I would say both, L.A., in my opinion.
Do me a favor, like when you stay right at that angle right there,
Okay.
because sometimes when you lean a little bit too far off, you leaning off the screen.
Okay, cool. Let me turn this camera around a little bit. Is that better?
Yeah. That's cool. So when you lean, it'll be great. It'll be great.
Perfect.
Okay, no problem. That's the female part. So what about the guys? How much of your time are you do you lose? How much of your lifetime do you lose? Because we don't know. We really talk about, we really sometimes skirt around the issue of people who won't say that they've wasted 5 years, 10 years, 15 years chasing 304s, and their legacy has hit the wall. Right. Because they didn't take their prime earning time seriously as they took their sexual exploits.
Right.
So if 304s did 304s win by taking you off of your purpose, or you being allowing the hedonism to take you off your purpose in the first place?
Well, you made an excellent point, and I'm going to give it to you based on theology. The gospel says is that a man sins when he's led away by his own lust. When he's led away by his own lust, so the 304 can't make you do anything. You know, the great teacher C.S. Lewis once said, L.A., that you can't stop a bird from flying over your head. I tell my clients that all the time. But you can't stop a bird from making a nest on top of your head. And so men become saboteurs of their own demise too, L.A., when they led astray by their own lust. And as I said it earlier, in therapy, we don't lie. We all as men have struggled with that, especially in our younger years. And with the advent of pornography and the internet, it's more readily in front of you. We have what's called cyber addicts as it relates to hedonism. It gets better as you get older because your sex drive tends to dip a little bit. But in your 20s, all this sexual stimulation for a lot of men, it's more or less taking them off their purpose. And I feel sorry for men because they're overly inundated with sexual images and also hypersexuality, which in essence is hard to look astray. When you turn to the left, you see butts and a vagina prints with yoga pants on. When you turn to the right, you see it. So how in the hell can a man live right in a culture where everything is so sexualized? It's hard because he's constantly being bombarded by sexual images. He can't turn to the left. He can't turn to the right because every time he looks, he sees sexuality. But however, here's the kicker. There was a time, L.A., back in the past, and I need you young men to listen, where women conducted themselves as icons of virtue. Now the modern woman has become an iconoclast. An iconoclast basically means that the virtue that she once had in the past, now that virtue has been decimated, L.A., because the more naked bodies you see, it loses its redeeming power or power of virtue because you become conditioned to see it over and over again. That's why when men go to strip clubs or a bouncer works at the strip club, He's used to perky breasts and a big butt and a naked vagina because he's seen it so many times. So it's no big deal. But if that man is not used to that, or he's in a society where the women are covered more, then when he finally see it, he wants it more because it's mysterious. So the mystique that once was a virtue now has become an iconoclast. And because of that, nobody wins. Like the song back in the past said, the whole world laughing at me, silly fool. And that's what you're seeing now. The women are getting laughed at, man, because they've given their virtue away. And it's unfortunate.
Maybe, you know what? I'll take a different angle of argument on this. You talked about the cybersexual. I personally think that the difference between the old virtue and the cybersexual of today is something very simple. Men have become socially awkward
That's true too.
because the virtuous time you approach people directly.
Right.
It was a direct person to person society. So even if you had the ability to be meet a woman who seemed virtuous in her demeanor, but you can ask her to be unvirtuous for you, and it was her choice to choose. But see, because we became cybersexual, as you said, but I'll add cybersexual Peter Pan syndrome. A lot of us lost because since we are socially awkward, we never approach people in our 20s, sometimes in our 30s. We've entered a society where you don't approach people. So you prolong the idea of, these 304s are winning. How they winning if you never talk to them? You never got it out your system because you just DM'd them. You just like the picture. Like you said, you see the yoga pants and the imprints and the revealing clothes. Well, interestingly enough, those guys see all that and they go to the left and the right and they look, but you know what they don't do? They don't approach. So now we got one of the reasons I was saying earlier, hedonism is winning is because what we have is a lot of people live in a fantasy in their head about what will go down in their bedroom, but they never make it a reality. It's just a manifestation that they're hoping to happen one day.
Right.
All happenstance. Like when we used to be children singing in the mirror with a brush, hoping that, we'd just be famous somehow.
Right.
So maybe 304s are winning because they get more interaction because they're having more people approach them and they can shoot people down. But maybe these guys are losing. If they're losing because they fell for the trap of approaching people on social media that they can approach in person.
Right. That's a good point. That's a good point. That's a very good point. That's a good. Well, definitely, there's research behind the social awkwardness of a lot of our boys and men. And that's for a myriad of reasons. Some of that is technology, but some of it is the Me Too movement, where a lot of guys are afraid to talk. So it's a myriad of reasons for that sexual awkwardness. You and I are Gen Xers, and I remember a time when men and women, the guys were talking. Whether you got rejected, it was what it was. We were better socialized, but this generation of kids, men and women, can be very, very socially awkward because they have not been conditioned to talk. The computer talks for them, which in essence is not good for society.
Because ironically, people will say 304s are winning, but the bimbo had a stereotype,
right,
of not being too bright,
right.
And since we don't approach like we used to, these guys don't even know that a lot of these 304s are not too bright.
Right. That's true. Right.
So you don't even realize they're socially awkward. You are so wrong for that. So wrong for that. And bringing that up, that group actually takes advantage of the social awkwardness because, let me see how I can say this. you can imitate a man approaching you better than a man will approach you, because men, like you said, are scared of the Me Too movement. I personally think men are scared of 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 just rejection, because the
Right,
Me
right,
Too
right, right,
movement doesn't apply when you're out at the sports bar or at a restaurant or in a grocery store.
right, right.
You know, it doesn't apply then.
Mm-hmm,
At a gas station, it doesn't apply then.
mm-hmm.
You know, so even at a strip club, it doesn't apply.
Right, right.
That's what the atmosphere is for. You're selling a fantasy, and maybe, just maybe, saying that 304s, if 304s are winning, and they took on, let's say, stripper culture.
Mm-hmm.
The best part about stripper culture is it's a fantasy for pay.
Right.
Now, if you're silly enough, but you know what happens with most people who go to strip clubs? Their fantasies to pay their way into a sexual experience,
Mm-hmm.
and then they get upset when they run out of money.
Right.
And if you've ever been in a strip club, fellas, if you ever just listened to the dancers and the guys around, you're gonna always run into two things. Some guy who's, I would say, socially awkward and overly aggressive unnecessarily.
Mm-hmm.
How much for that? I give you $200. Do.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, bro, you. I mean, you in a strip club. You're in a strip club, not a brothel. It's not that. You might want to, rail it in a little bit. Maybe that will happen with you, but you ain't making this any better for yourself. And then you have, um, guys getting their heart broke because she won't stay with him after he runs out of 20s.
well, well, listen, that goes back to what we talked about, the unconscious simp. He supplements irrational male behavior. Male behavior, which in essence is supplying her narcissistic traits. A lot of our women have narcissistic traits because men in the past demanded power. Raekwon the Man don't have to do all of that, because Raekwon the Man don't give a damn. Raekwon the Man just do what they want to do, and a lot of times they find that attractive because he's a what's the word? He's a chase and he's a challenge, and many times she want to either change him or get validation, and that's why when men learn to love themselves and focus on themselves, man, everything else take care of itself, man. It takes care of itself. But we live in a very dysfunctional culture, man, and I definitely don't think that the 304s are winning. Up front, it's an illusion that they're winning. But on the back end, they're not winning.
Okay, we got about 5 more minutes, folks. So we're going to hit, I feel like.
Man, we got to do this again, man. I feel
no
rushed,
problem.
man. We're going to do this again, man. I
No
love these
problem.
conversations with you, man, because you're intellectual. I love
So,
you got that Sagittarian swag. So
since we got 5 minutes and counting, I'm about to hit. So what did losers who lost the 304s, what did they lose?
This is what the losers lost. They lost their dignity as a man. They lost time. They lost their inherent self-worth. They lost their ability to broker power. But more or less, they lost the thing that they wanted the most, which was that woman. That's what they lost.
This is gonna suck. How many of these guys who are losers, how many of them care about what they lost?
Well, it depends on if you ask the man. His ass don't care unless you get him in court where he got to stand before the judge, until he comes to that epiphany that he's going to lose half of his assets, perhaps. But if there's no cost loss, then he probably really don't care. But once again, that's a man that's not a disciplined man or a wise man, and he's not aware of what his worth is. So it just depends on what man you ask. It depends on the man.
I'm gonna make it fast. Do the trinkets that 304s win last them more than a year?
No, because human beings, the physical part might last, but the satiation that made them want that trinket, no. The hedonism is like that damn plant called Seymour. He said, feed me. It's never enough. The more you feed the plant, the more he wants. You know, we live in a society, LA, where it becomes lust unbridled. It's called unbridled lust. So you can never satiate it. You can satiate it for the moment, but you can never satiate it because it's lust. Lust and hedonism are synonymous to one another. So you can never satiate it. You can never satiate that lust because they're not conditioned and they don't have any discipline. A man that likes discipline, LA, or woman, will bring himself to poverty and he'll bring himself to shame because the lack of discipline brings brokenness and the lack of discipline brings pain. So initially, yes, there's a feeling with it's a dopamine hit. But like most drug addicts, that rush goes away over time. That trinket that she got, she liked it initially, but how many women you know that got a bag full of clothes or shoes, they like it initially, but they're constantly buying shoes because those trinkets cannot satisfy the inner conscience of a man. Men and women are spiritual beings. And there's a spiritual vacuum, LA, in a lot of these men and women. And until that spiritual vacuum has been filled, they will continue on that karmic cycle, as they say in Hinduism. And I don't believe in Hinduism, but it's called, they're constantly trying to more or less refine themselves. It's called the karmic cycle. They're constantly trying to refine themselves. And they never get anywhere. It's like a damn gerbil in a Ferris wheel. They're running to nowhere. Until that vacuum gets filled, they remain broken. In the clinical world, we call it the bio, which is the body, soma, the psycho, which is the mind, the social, which is the environment, and then the spiritual. When all of those four components, LA, are calibrated, then you have what's called cohesion or equilibrium. But there is no cohesion or equilibrium, LA, because there's a lot of brokenness. Until that spiritual vacuum be filled, then that karmic cycle will continue.
I got one last question. Shout out to Truck Turner, thanks. Because the drug addict thing kept coming up even in the comment section and in this conversation. So I don't care which side is the 304 is winning, the guys are losing, the guys are winning, the 304s are losing. I don't care. Both sides are acting like drug addicts, it seems. So are we talking about functional drug addicts? Or are we talking about people chasing the dragon?
Are we talking about functional drug addicts or what? People chasing the what?
Chasing the dragon.
What is the dragon?
The dragon is the first hit that people were trying to, people who are drug addicts, they chase the dragon, which is the first high that they can never get again.
Right. Well, listen, the byproduct of chasing the dragon makes them a functional addict. I'm going to say it again. The byproduct of them chasing the dragon makes them a functional addict. A true addict is a person that cannot fulfill his obligations or social duties or financial duties or whatever duties because the dragon has him encapsulated. But a functional person or functional addict, they can work, they can still go to school, but they still have machinations like smoking that weed or getting that hit. That's not going to benefit them long term. If that answered your question. I hope I did. I hope I answered.
Okay. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're about to shut this thing down. We've been on here. It's a great show.
Oh, we're gonna do it again, man.
Oh,
we're
yeah.
Gonna do it again. I gotta get to the office, man. But we're gonna do it again.
Shout out to the Kosher Clinician. Go subscribe to his channel. This is a great discussion. We will catch y'all. Let me see if I can go ahead and I'm gonna try to end this thing with one of these banner things, the same way we started, and they can get up out of here, a brand or something. So like, share, subscribe, or die trying. Catch y'all on the next one, folks. Peace.
Peace. Peace, y'all. Knowledge bomb. What the science, baby?
What's happening, fam? L.A.R. movement still moving. Subscribe or die trying.